All right, everybody, welcome back. For today, we're going to be finding the slope of a line. So again, when we're looking at lines, obviously we have different kind of lines. Like this one right here, we would say it's increasing because it's going up. The other thing we have to remind you is when you read, right, in an English class, you would read from left to right, core concept, slope from a graph. Lines are read the same way. You read lines from left to right. That's why we would say that this line is increasing because it's kind of going up or going uphill if you were walking along this line. But there are different kind of slopes, and we'll touch upon those in a bit. But the first thing we have to let you know is, well, what is the slope, right? What is the slope of a line and what does it represent? So we're going to start it off with a quick little definition here for the slope of a line. And so it says, the slope here, it measures the slant of a line. So we want to know how slanted this is, right? Like if I were going uphill, well, I want to know how steep this line is. So it's also called the steepness or the slant of the line. The steeper the line is, the more difficult it'll be for me to go up this hill versus, like I said, maybe if the line is decreasing, it would be very easy because it's dropping. There is a very special letter that we use for slope in math, and the letter that we use to represent slope in math is the letter M. So from now on, most of the time when you see the letter M, it's going to represent slope. And to find it, so here's the thing, this is today's big topic, to find how steep a line is. So to find the slope, the big thing is you're going to need 2 points. So that's the key. We're definitely going to need 2 points. So that's why when you're looking at your picture here, I have this point already highlighted, right? Nice and dark. There's this one right here. And we're always going to look for points that land perfectly on a coordinate system. Notice it's not halfway up or halfway through. No. Perfect little points. We're always going to look for those to make our life easier. In fact, this one right here is the point 2, 3. This one right here would be 4 and then comma 6. So these are the 2 points that I'm going to look at. And so then the question is, all right, well, you have 2 points, so how do you find slope? So to find the slope, here is our technique. The slope is equal to, all we have to do is figure out, well, how much do you rise over how much do you run to the side? Now, when we talk about rise, that means that we're either going up, so clearly that's going to be if it's positive, or if we're heading down, if we had a negative number. And then to make things a little bit easier, my run, we're always going to stick to the right side for now. Just to try to be consistent, we're going to make sure that my run is always to the side. So really a positive means I go up, a negative means we head down. Now, we can see this picture here and use it to help us out. I want to know how to get from this point to this one. Remember, not backwards. We go left to right. So I'm going to start counting, and I go 1, 2, 3. Look at that. I have to go 3 blocks up or 3 spaces up. So my rise for this one is 3. And then from here, I would go to the side. So my run would be 2 spaces that I have to go over. So that's why when they say the slope, well, remember my slope is my rise over my run. My rise was 3 over my run, which is 2. And this is how we're going to be finding slope. Again, slope, we're measuring how steep a line is. So I need 2 very good points, easy to work with, so that I can actually count the spaces in between. How much do I go up? And then how much do we go to the side? Now, there is another way of thinking about slope. And one of the techniques that we do bring up in class is all I have to do is I'm going to subtract the y's. I'm going to subtract the y's. And notice, look at where my y's were. 6 and 3. If I subtract them, 6 minus 3 is just 3. Well, that's why we have a 3 on the top. Or for the bottom, and for the bottom, I am going to subtract my x's. And so here are my x's, the 4 and the 2, And so 4, subtract the 2, there's the 2 underneath. So we can use it algebraically, right? We can do a little bit of math using subtraction, or we can just count the spaces. You just have to be very careful when you do your counting. You're not counting lines, you're counting the spaces in between. Just keep that in mind. And so one of the things that we did mention, and we didn't write it down, so we have room here, we could write it here. Just remember, we read slope from left to right. This is the reminder that when we do this, we want to make sure that I'm picking the point on the left first and then heading to the point that I have on the right side. All right, now, let's see. One last thing before we actually try some of these problems, because we do have everything that we need already. I just want to let you know that there are 4 types of slopes that we should be aware of. 4 types of slopes. And I know we're very low on space here, but that's okay. Look, we'll make it work. So 4 types of slopes. So right now, let's draw 4 little XY planes. So we're going to draw these little XY planes here. Again, we need 4 of them. Ooh, just enough space for that last one there. All right, so there's actually 4 types of lines that we can have. The first one we already saw, look, we have a line that's increasing. So we would have it like this, just draw a line going straight up that way. This is what we call a positive slope. Remember, when you have a positive slope, my line is increasing. But then we can also have a line that is decreasing. So we can have a line that you could say, oh, it's dropping. Remember, you read from left to right. It is dropping, so then my slope would be negative. And then, of course, we have the 2 special lines that have already come up in our notes. We have a horizontal line, right? It goes side to side. And when you have a horizontal line, think about it. This is a positive slope because I go up and over, up and over, up and over. But when you have a line like this, you don't need to go up. You don't need to head down. So that means my rise would be 0. And if you divide 0 by anything, then we have a 0 slope. So this is actually a number. My slope is 0. And then, of course, there's the last line. Now, remember, a vertical line isn't a function. We've mentioned that before. It's not even a function. So in this case, positive slope, negative slope, 0 slope, so it's flat. You can't walk up a line like this, right? We didn't say climb. We're talking about walking up and down. That can't be done. So when we see this, we say that slope is undefined. Or you could say this is a no slope. Now, no slope is very different than 0. 0 is an actual number. This one right here, no slope, means you can't even mention any kind of number with it. That's why we like to use the word undefined, so we don't accidentally think that 0 means nothing. Like no slope, I mean. So we use undefined instead. It just doesn't exist, a slope for this one. Again, it's not even a function to begin with, just like we said before. All right, so there are a lot of details in that first note, so take a moment to catch up with the writing there. The assignment is a lot easier than everything that we just wrote, but again, it's our first time looking at slope and reading slope, really. It's the first time we do that. So we're going to try a couple problems here, of course. We're going to look at example number 1 here. All right, start moving this thing up. If you're still writing some of the stuff at the bottom, you can still keep writing, and we have these problems as we go so we can look at it carefully here. All right, now again, remember what they said. You have to pick points that are easy to work with. So they already gave them to me. They said I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to use this one. One idea that somebody in the past said was, so I'm kind of making a triangle, right? And you kind of are. Look, I need to go up a certain amount, but you got to keep track of that point. So notice, I have to go up to this level here, this y value, and then I have to go over to get to that point. Notice how we're making a triangle, and it's called a right triangle because it's got that 90. But what matters here is, well, we've got to do a little bit of a count. So this is my run, this is my rise, and so now look, you can even count it up. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, so my rise is 4. My run, well, let's see, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, still not there. So 6 spaces. So my run would be 6. All right, well, we're ready to go. Look, first of all, is my slope positive or negative? Well, look up here. It's increasing, so we know it's going to be positive. All right, well, here's my slope. Remember, rise over run. The rise is on top. Run is at the bottom. So my rise is 4. My run is 6. And there it is. There's my slope. But one of the things, of course, in high school math especially is we don't need we always have to make sure fractions can't be reduced any further, and these can. I can divide each one of these by 2. Fractions should always be reduced in our class. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And that right there would be the slope. So when you're working on big ideas math at some point, you have to remember fractions should always be reduced. All right, so we're going to try it here again. Now, when I look at this line, look at this. If I'm walking along this line, I'm heading down. That means this line is negative. It is decreasing. So I already know my answer better be negative. If it's not negative, I did something wrong. All right, but I have my 2 points. This is my first one. Here's my second one. Remember, we're going to head down in this case, right to that level there. And then we're going to head to the side. Remember, my run is always to the right side. All right, we're still going to call it a rise. This is still my run. All I have to do now is just count my spaces carefully. So I was here. I have to go 1, 2, 3 spaces. So that means my rise is -3. And why a negative? Well, we're not rising. We're heading down. We're falling, if you want to say that. It's falling down 3 spaces, so -3. My run is to the right, and look, it's only 2 spaces over, so my run will be the number 2. Well, then I'm ready. My slope, its rise, well, that's a -3, over the run, which is a 2. And again, the question is, well, can you reduce a 3 and a 2? The answer is no. We don't need to turn it into 1.5 or 1.5. We want one fraction only here. And that's our answer. So if it can't be reduced like we did here, then we just leave it alone. Okay. Now, look at those 2 practice problems right there for you. Okay? So we're going to keep talking about it here. Normally we would say, okay, take a moment, work on these problems. But look, let's talk about it. This is a brand new idea. So here we go. I've got these 2 dots right here. And I'm going to do my slope. So that means I am heading down to this y level. And then I'm heading over to this x right here. Don't forget, there's my rise. There's my run right here on this side. And now all I'm going to do is count spaces. 1, 2. So my rise is not a 2. It's a -2. Remember, we are dropping by 2. My run, well, count the spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 5. Almost forgot that one right there. So we have 5 spaces. And my run is 5. Notice this is not negative. My run is always to the right. Moving to the right is always a positive number. So my slope, don't forget, your rise is on the top. So there's your -2. Your run is at the bottom, my x's, right? So there's the 5. Can 2 and 5 be reduced? Not at all. Then there's my answer. So again, when you're doing slope, you're looking for 2 points that work out nicely, that are going to be easy to work with and count with, and then we go from there. So look, here's this one, here's this one. Now remember, I forgot to ask you earlier, look at this line. Is my slope positive or negative? Well, it's decreasing, so we should have said it was going to be a negative, but we saw that here anyways. So when I look at this one, this line is increasing, so what does that tell me about my slope? And if you're thinking, yes, it's positive, that's absolutely right. Now all I have to do is just count spaces. Remember, I'm not going from this one this way. We don't go backwards. Left to right. So I'm going to go up. Nope, I have to keep going one more here. Okay, there we go. I need to go up to that level. And then I need to go to the right all the way over there. Again, this is my run. This is my rise. Rising means up or down, right? It could be up or down. All right, let's count the spaces. So starting from here, look at that. 1 space, 2, 3, 4. You are counting spaces and it's positive because we're going up. Look at my run. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces just to get over. So my run is 6. Now, I know it looks very much like the one we did up here, but look, the points were actually very different than these. But my slope, in this case, my rise is 4, my run is 6. But you remember, we saw this earlier. When you ask yourself, hey, can these be reduced? Absolutely. They can both be divided by 2. And so your m is equal to 2 over 3 with the reduction. So again, this is the first time we see slope, but notice, that's why in the note we said you need to have 2 points, and then look, create that right triangle. That's what's going to help us. But that only works if I actually have a picture of a line, right? If I have a graph of a line. So once you're ready, look, flip the page. Let's see what else they're going to throw at us when it comes to this concept of slope. So let's see. Well, notice. Now, yes, they're giving me points, which is good. I need to have 2 of them, but we have no formula. Sorry, we have no picture. We have no visual of how we're gonna, what we're gonna use for these. But that's okay. When we're trying to find slope, don't forget we also have a formula that I can use. So that's what this concept is for this section. We are going to be talking about the slope formula. Now, the slope formula does show up in our word wall, so it is there. So we're just going to give it to you again. We need 2 points. So you need 2 points. Notice, that's why all the examples have 2 points there. So we need 2 points. Let's see. You're going to need one with an X and a Y, of course. And then you're going to need another one with an X and a Y. But it's kind of tough to tell them apart. Like, well, which one are you talking about? So this will be my first point. So I'll put a little 1 under both. This will be my second point. All right. So now, remember, we do have a letter that represents slope in math. So my slope, which we already said is the letter M, is equal to, all right, here's the formula. You're always going to use a fraction. And remember, on the other side, we said you have to subtract. So I'm going to subtract top and bottom. So you're always going to have a minus sign to begin with. And now the question is, okay, well, what am I subtracting? Remember, it's called rise over run. That means you have to have your rise, which are your y's on the top. Your run goes to the sides, just like your x does. So your x's go at the bottom. And again, if you're trying to figure out, okay, but which one do I use first? It really doesn't matter. You can use either one of these first. For instance, what if I choose y2 first? If I choose y2 and I'm going to write y1, then I would do this. y2, y1. But you have to be consistent. If you went with y2 and then went to that number, then you have to do the same thing on the x. You can't switch this arrow. You got to go that way. So that's why it would be my x2 and my x1. And just remember, the main thing to remember is this. Yes, you have to be consistent with your order, but just remember, all you're going to do is subtract your y's over subtract your x's. You just have to remember who's on top of the fraction, who's at the bottom of the fraction. At higher levels of math, we would call it delta y over delta x. Delta just means you're finding the change between the numbers, aka subtraction. But anyways, this right here, this is the slope formula that we've been talking about, okay? M is for slope. Yes, it's always going to be minus signs to begin with, and it's always going to be a big fraction. But now we don't have to draw them. I don't have to draw a picture. I don't have to count spaces. I can just use a formula and, well, plug everything in. So let's show you how it works. So for example number 2, let me see, I want to make sure that formula fits in there with us. All right, so here's our formula. Using the slope formula, use the slope formula to find the slope of the line given 2 points. All right, now I actually like to write my points one right underneath the other. So I'm just going to write this one down right here. 3, -6. See, I'm just lining them up. So all I did was just move it down. All right, now that they're lined up, I'm going to choose an order. Look, I'm just going to go straight down. These are my X's, these are my Y's. Again, you have to be consistent with order. All right, and now here comes my slope formula. I'm just going to copy what I have up here. It says M is equal to, you put a fraction, you put minus signs on both. See, I'm not worried about numbers. Don't worry about numbers yet. All right, so according to the note, your Y's are on the top. So my Y's will be on the top. Well, then I'm going to put them right here. Now notice my arrow. I chose to start with the 4, and then I'm going to write -6. Now remember, I'm not talking about that minus sign. You need to give it a -6. You can't say, oh, the negative's already there. No, it isn't. That is the minus sign for the formula. And then, of course, it says put your X's at the bottom. All right, well, here come the X's. The X's are -2 and 3, and those are the ones that are going to go here. So I'm going to go -2 because that one's first, and then 3 is after. There. That's technically the toughest part of the formula. Let me zoom in nice and big so you can see it. But again, you need that extra negative because now I can do the work. See, when I'm looking at this one, the negative actually becomes a positive. And you know what? We have the space. Let me just do it right underneath. So remember, the negative actually becomes a +6. And then these are both negative. You don't change anything there. That's not a double negative, only that is. All right, so let's do the math. M is equal to 4 plus 6 is 10. And then, of course, according to the word wall, I'm going to be adding these two numbers. 2 plus 3 is 5, but I'm keeping the sign. And then remember, a fraction means division. So 10 divided by -5, M is equal to 2. Now, again, I just wanted to make sure I didn't skip any steps. I wanted you to see every detail of how we go from here to here. Double negatives become positive. This is not a double negative. We leave it alone and just did the math. All right, so now it looked like it was a lot of work. It really wasn't. We just rewrote the problem. That's why it seemed like a lot. So let's try it again. We're going to do the same thing we just did. They said use the slope formula to find the slope. So what I'm going to do is I like writing the point right underneath the other. So 4 -2. There it is. Just wrote it down. Just copied it. That's all I did. And now I'm going to pick some orders. So I'm going to head straight down. These are my X's. These are my Y's. All right, here goes slope. M is equal to a fraction. Automatic minus signs. Automatic. You don't leave those out. My Y's are on top. Okay, those are my Y's. They're going to go on top. So -2, and yes, another -2. You can throw maybe little parentheses so we could see the double negative. All right, my X's are at the bottom. So I'm going to go in order. 9 minus, and then it's just the 4. All right, so now look, again, we have a double negative. No, you don't change that one. In fact, let me just rewrite it. Look at the top, -2, but a negative becomes +2. And then at the bottom, you still have 9 minus 4. All right, here we go. -2 plus 2 is actually 0, and that's okay. Write it down, 0. 9 minus 4 is 5. And so now, what's 0 divided by 5? Well, if you think about it, what's 0 divided by anything? 0. And that's my slope. So look, if you think about these two problems, This one right here means the line was heading up. See, that's what I know about that line. When your slope is 0, my line is horizontal, straight side to side. This is what the slope is giving me a heads up about what my lines were going to be looking like, because eventually we're going to draw these. But again, that's where the slope can help. All right. Now, before you do the practice problems, because I do need you to practice these, before you do that, I want to show you the last concept of the day, and then we're going to have you do the practice problems and check your answers with the mentors afterwards. So right now, again, hold off, just wait. Flip the page. Last idea of the day. Yep, last idea of the day. Slopes from a table. So we're going to show you these last two ideas, and then you'll do the practice problems just to make sure you understand how to do them. Okay, slopes from a table. Now, when we're working with a table, keep in mind, it still says slope. It doesn't matter that it's from a table. The fact is, when you're dealing with slope, there's my letter M. We already said it's rise over your run, and so it's your change in y over how your x's are changing. That's what we're looking for. This is what slope is. Remember, that little symbol just means change in math. So it's how my y's are changing over my x's. All right, so look. They actually gave me an example here. Remember, when you're doing your x's, this is what I would do. This is my run. And my y is my rise. So we've worked with tables before. All I need you to do is look for a pattern. Once you have this pattern, you'll be able to tell me what the rise and the run is. So you see, I'm going to start getting it ready. Here's my fraction. Let's talk about the x's. So the first question is, how are your x's changing? Well, how do I go from a 1 to a 4? How do I go from a 4 to a 7? And how do I go from a 7 to a 10? So we see the numbers are getting bigger, so addition. And if you're thinking, oh, I'm just adding by 3, yeah, 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 3 is 10. Remember, that's what makes something linear, this constant, right? So then my run is 3, so be careful, don't put that on the top. I know it's our top numbers, but x actually goes at the bottom, so I'm going to write the 3 underneath. So now I'm going to look at the y's. So when I'm looking at my y values, I start to notice, hey, my y's are getting smaller. As I move over, right, to the right, my y values are getting smaller, so then only subtraction can do that. And so the question is, well, what are they subtracting by? 8 minus 2 will give me a 6. 6 minus 2 will give me a 4. 4 minus 2 is going to give me a 2. Well, there's the pattern. But don't forget, this is my rise, and the rise is what goes on top. And just like that, we're done. See, this is what we're going to be doing when we have tables. It's all about looking for patterns in math. Well, tables, it's all about patterns. And now think about it. If this is a negative 2 over 3, the one thing that you could tell me about this line, it was most likely decreasing, right? It's a negative slope, so the line would look like this if I were actually drawing it because of that negative. So that's all we're going to do. We're just going to practice doing slope for both of these. Now remember, sometimes the tables are going like this horizontally, which is what you're going to do in your practice problems later on. So we also want to show you how we do them with lines that are vertical. Sorry, with tables that are vertical. All right, so here we go. My x, don't forget, is my run. My y's are the rise. Remember, order matters. Your x will go at the bottom, your y's are on the top. So let's start talking about patterns. If you notice, the numbers are getting bigger and bigger as we go. So the question is, well, what's the pattern? They're going up by how much? And they're going up by 3. If that's what you were thinking, then you were on the right track. And then the y's, well, look, 20, 14, 8. Okay, the numbers are dropping. So if the numbers are dropping, now remember, they already told me these are lines, so it's got to work. So these are going to be dropping by the same number over and over. 20 down to a 14, that would be 6. 14 minus 6, that's an 8. 8 minus 6, there's my 2. So yes, this is a constant rate of change. That's why we know it's linear. So now we're talking about slope. So my slope, don't forget, rise, -6, over the run, which is 3. Now remember, a fraction means division in math. So what is -6 divided by 3? -2. And there's my slope. Which again, what does that mean about my line? It's decreasing. It would be a line that is falling, if you want to say it that way, but it's kind of dropping off as you go to the right side. All right, 2 more here. Let's continue the practice. Again, your X is your run, your Y is your rise. So let's get that pattern going. Let's look at these X's here. We just want to know how much are they, in this case, growing again. They're getting bigger and bigger. So we just want to know how much the increase is. So plus, 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 let's see. -1 to 1. Now, if you always find that first one a little tough to do because of the negatives, do the next two. Look, how do you go from a 1 to a 3? 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. So then look, -1 plus 2 is a 1. All right, so we have our run. So now we're going to do our rise. Ooh, look at that. How do you go from a 2 to a 2 to a 2 to a 2 to a 2? Yeah, we don't add anything. That's just a 0. I'm adding nothing to it. It's the same number over and over and over and over. All right, well then that's okay. Look, here comes my slope. We already said slope is rise, so 0, over your run, 2, and what's 0 divided by any number? 0. Don't overthink that one. You don't need a calculator for that. 0. So that means that if I were drawing this line would be horizontal. Okay. All right, last one. Let's see again. See, the technique doesn't change. My X's are my run. My Y is my rise. It has to do with that. All right, let's talk about X's. Well, look at the pattern here. Nothing is changing. So then technically, I do have to say I'm adding something. Well, then I'm adding 0. Adding 0 means nobody changed. Everybody's the same. But when I look at my Y values, they're growing this time. So let's see how much they are growing by. And again, if the negatives throw you off, well, then jump to this. Now, this is a little strange here. I know it's going to throw some off here. -3 to 0 is add 3. And I think there is a typo here. So we got to do a little fix here, a little fix. And then I'll explain it later on where it should be okay. That should be a 3 and this should be a 6. 0 to 3 is we add 3. 3 plus 3 is 6. So you see that's the fix there. All right, but now that we see that, look, my slope rises on the top. So I'm going to put a 3 on the top. My run is a 0 at the bottom. So here's the thing. 0 divided by a number is automatically 0. But are we allowed to divide by 0 in math? The answer is no. We can never divide by 0 in math. It's not like this one. This one's okay, but not that. This is why when you get a 0 at the bottom of the fraction, we say the slope is undefined. That's the answer. And again, the reason for saying undefined is because there's a 0 underneath. So we're going to make a little note here. We cannot divide by 0. That's why we're giving this answer, because we cannot divide by 0 in math. Again, 0 on the top, perfect, 0. But a 0 at the bottom, that can never happen. Now remember, if it's undefined, it is a line, but it's a line that goes up and down. That's why 0 was underneath. So if you ever see X's all being the same, right, meaning the pattern is 0, 0, 0 for the run, you can just go straight to saying undefined. You don't even really have to waste your time looking at the Y's anymore, because when all your X's repeat, that's an undefined slope. Okay, With that said, everybody, you do have the practice problems here at the bottom, but you also have the practice problems on page 22. So yes, you are going to be trying 5 problems right here. The ones on page 22, and then of course the ones on page 23. So get the practice in with the formula first, get them checked, and then try these out, of course, like we just did right now. Get them checked, and if it's all good, then you're ready to start with today's classwork, which is page 24, and with the handout that you have for homework. All right, with that said, have a wonderful day, everybody.